Hello everyone. In this video I want to talk about basically everything I'm doing to study German on my own at the moment. I'm going to go over some of my favorite activities and resources and also some of my favorite resources from the past that I've left behind a little because I've been kind of busy with university and other stuff. This is going to be more of a rambly video. I haven't structured this as much, so it's probably going to be divided into sections and you can jump ahead to a topic that is interesting to you. I would like to start by saying that I am someone who learns German as a hobby. I don't really have any kind of pressure to learn the language. I'm just doing it because I want to. That's why these activities might not be the best or the most efficient way for you to learn German, but they work for me and they keep me interested and wanting to learn the language. So maybe you get one or two interesting ideas from this video. And I feel like it's important to remember that these videos that present resources and activities are really personal, and I'm going to mention many things, but you should never feel the pressure to have a specific routine when it comes to your language learning, especially if you do it as a hobby as I do. I am someone who sometimes puts too much pressure on themselves with things that initially were hobbies, and lately I'm trying to go with the flow a little more and have different resources and activities available for me so that I can pick something random whenever I feel like studying. For this same reason, I don't have a set or fixed routine of things that I have to do every day. And as a last disclaimer, most or all of these resources are focused on reading and listening comprehension because I am not focusing on output. So I'm not really paying much attention to writing or speaking the language yet. I'm planning to start focusing on that in a few months. But I want to have a good grasp of the language before I start producing output, or otherwise I kind of get discouraged when I want to write or say something and I don't have the structures and the vocabulary to do it. So with all that being said, let's get started with all of the resources that I'm currently using. Checking because this is the second time that I'm recording this and there's not going to be a third. So I think my main study / immersion resource at the moment is the ABC show Once Upon a Time, which kind of feels like a soap opera with a fantasy setting. It follows a group of characters from fairy tales who are cursed to live mundane lives without memory of who they really were. And the show is one of the biggest guilty pleasures that I have had in my life. It's so dramatic and so ridiculous and sometimes unintentionally funny. But it's also proven to be a great resource for me because the story is complex and intricate enough to keep me interested in what's going to happen. And since it deals with fairy tales known all around the world, it's fairly easy to follow the story and to know or to understand what's going on. Additionally, I've been enjoying the visual context that a show provides as opposed to something like reading, for example. At the moment, I find watching something to be more engaging and more dynamic. Whatever resource you pick for immersion, the most important thing is that it's something that you enjoy. For any reason, you have to engage with that content intellectually or emotionally. And yeah, at the moment, it's Once Upon a Time for me. There are some things I do while I watch the show to make the most out of the time I spend with it. I'll mainly use this show as an example of how I study with audiovisual content. So I watch this show dubbed into German with German subtitles. And as is usually the case, what people say in the dub and what you read in the subtitles doesn't match because the translations are different. But I don't mind in this specific case. Most of the time, sentences are simple enough in this show that I can understand them without even looking anything up, which has been really encouraging. It has been a real concrete proof of my progress in the language, and that's really exciting. I think I sometimes even benefit from comparing what a character says and what it reads in the subtitles, because it can show you two different ways of saying the same things with different structures or words. I think dubbed shows or content in general that has voice actors is great to start practicing your listening comprehension, because it's a little easier than listening to native speakers speaking in real conversational contexts. Voice actors usually make an extra effort to pronounce things carefully, and it's easy to pick up sentences and expressions.
Schon gut, das ist
Nein, ist es nicht.
Spielen Sie hier nicht den Gentleman.
Riesen können Blut riechen. Und ich bin ein Gentleman.
Also the mix of the German dub, which is sometimes unintentionally funny too, with the CGI of the show and the drama, it's hypnotizing in a way. As I watch the show, I take screenshots of sentences with new terms that I want to learn. All of these screenshots go into a folder until afterwards I turn them into Anki flashcards to study from. I have made another video talking about how I study with Anki and audiovisual content. The only difference is that now I'm taking screenshots and leaving the process of creating the flashcards for later. I don't do it at the same time that I'm watching the show anymore, so as not to interrupt the story. I've also become more selective regarding which words I decide to save and turn into a flashcard. I used to save almost every word that I came across and that I didn't know. The thing is that I have like 700 Anki cards with sentences from shows and movies, and some of those words are really specific or not really something that is necessary at the stage that I'm at with the language. So now I'm trying to select words that are interesting or that I feel like, hey, that's a really common word that I would like to have in my vocabulary. Anki is a tool that some people like, some don't. I think you should try it out and see if it works for you. I really like this way of studying, and Anki is one of the resources that I feel have given me the most results. So I think it's worth having as a habit. One last thing, I don't understand everything that happens in the show or everything that the characters say. So for those cases in which I don't really feel like going back and watching a scene again, I keep a tab open on my browser with the show's wiki article for the episode that I'm watching. Most shows, or at least most well-known shows, have their own fandoms and wikis where you can find summaries or recaps of each episode, and for once upon a time even of each scene. I mean, in English, right? So it's really useful when I want to check if I've understood correctly, because the plot of this show gets surprisingly complicated sometimes. If a show you're trying to watch doesn't have a wiki, you can sometimes find these kinds of summaries in Wikipedia. So as a summary, I watch it, I take screenshots, I create Anki flashcards that I study from, and it's like a nice loop that keeps me learning words. Apart from this show, I also watch YouTube videos and Twitch streams, and something that really works for me is having a separate account in a separate web browser for everything German related. So when I open Google Chrome, I know that it's German time, and I have a separate YouTube account where the feed is filled with videos in German of topics that are interesting to me, and the same thing happens with Twitch. Yeah, that's like my German immersion bubble. Platforms like YouTube or Twitch offer endless possibilities to watch content in whatever your target language is. And I save a lot of videos to my watch later playlist. So that's where I go when I feel like doing something in German. I just open my watch later playlist and I know that there's something interesting to me waiting. Well, on the screen right now probably, and down in the description, I'm going to try to add some YouTube channels and Twitch streamers that I like, either because they make immersion easier than other channels or because the person speaks clearly and slowly. But what I recommend is that you do this initial search by yourself so that you find things that go with what you would usually watch in your native language, but now with the addition that it's in your target language. You know what I mean. I watch a lot of video game news and gameplays because that's really relaxing to me. Instead of a podcast, I usually listen to Twitch streamers as I cook or when I have to clean my apartment. Right now, YouTube and Twitch is kind of passive type of immersion for me. I think it's good to occasionally listen to native speakers, even if you are a beginner, even if you don't understand everything that is going on. I think it's good to become familiar with the sounds of the language and try to start separating words from each other and getting used to the way intonation works in your target language. Another resource that I really love is the Discord server German Learning and Discussion. This is a server that I found in the German subreddit, which is also a great resource. And it's been of great help. You can ask questions and have them answered by native speakers in a matter of minutes. You can chat with people either in English or in German about your language learning process or anything else. You can even do writing and translation exercises that get checked by native speakers. What else? Yeah, there are also free online classes sometimes given by teachers for free. So I recommend that you find communities of people learning the language you're learning, and Reddit and Discord are great places for this. Just as an example, while I was watching Once Upon a Time, I came across a kind of strange way of referring to another person, and it didn't make sense to me grammatically, so I asked my question on this server, and a few moments later someone explained to me that it's a formal or archaic way of speaking that makes sense in the context of fairy tales, but is not very common in everyday language. As a last note, they have curated this incredible list of resources with everything from dictionaries to YouTube channels that you can use to learn German. And that's also going to be in the description in case you are learning German too and you want to explore it. I recommend you go through it because there is really good information in it. I also play video games in my free time, and I try to play in German if I'm going to play at all. Lately, something that's really changed my life is the Xbox Game Pass subscription, which has this thing called cloud gaming, which lets you stream games even if your PC sucks like mine. You can just stream games that are hosted in another server, and as long as you have a fast and stable internet connection and a gamepad, you are ready to go. I've mainly been playing Monster Hunter Rise, a Japanese action RPG which, well, yeah, it's an action game, so it's not a text-heavy game, but since, as I said, the show is kind of my main resource at the moment, I don't really mind. And still, it requires that you pay attention to the dialogue and the interface to know what's going on. You're still being exposed to your language. In a way, it feels like being a kid again and trying to decipher games that were only in English, as I used to do when I was a child. Now I'm more at peace with the idea of watching or playing something and not understanding everything, not getting 100% of the meaning. Now I'm going to quickly mention 3 tools that I really like to use no matter what I'm doing in German. The first one is ChatGPT. You've probably heard a lot about this tool, and you can find in the description a video that I really liked about different prompts that you can use to learn languages with ChatGPT. And you can ask ChatGPT literally anything. You can even ask it how it can help you learn languages if you don't want to watch a video. I usually ask ChatGPT the questions that I have, and only when I doubt of its answer, I will go to the Discord server and talk to a real person to make sure the information is correct. The next tool is DeepL. You also might have heard about it. It's one of the best free translators around. It's useful if you quickly want to know what something means, which, I mean, I of course don't do this all the time, but sometimes if you don't feel like making the effort, it's helpful. And it also works the other way around. I like to translate into German things that I write in other languages, such as short diary entries or even poems, just to get a feel of how something that is emotionally relevant to me would sound in my target language, which I think is always interesting. And what you may not know is that DeepL has a new function called DeepL Write. It's only available for English and German at the moment, but probably more languages will be added in the future. And this tool is amazing. It's an AI tool that corrects your texts. And from my experience, it does a better job than ChatGPT, for example. And it also offers you alternatives for whatever you're trying to say. Be aware that the tool focuses on writing in a specific way, which is really like concise and simple. So sometimes it might correct things that aren't technically wrong. As long as you keep that in mind, this is an amazing tool that I use almost every day. I would also like to mention my favorite dictionaries. My favorite one at the moment is dict.cc. I like how many options it shows for each word so that you get a sense of all the possibilities as regards how a particular term could be translated into your target language. And I also like that underneath you can see common phrases and sentences which include the term that you have searched for. When for some reason this dictionary doesn't satisfy me, which is almost never, but I also like puns. I like that it has the IPA transcription, so I can read IPA, and that's useful when I want to know exactly how a word is pronounced. Most of these tools have their app versions that you can have on your phone, so that's a nice bonus. As you see, I'm using bilingual dictionaries still. I'm planning to switch to monolingual dictionaries soon as I feel like I can get around just reading definitions in German. Now, I'm going to move over to resources that I really like and that I sometimes use them and sometimes don't. It definitely has to do with what I'm motivated to do. Well, I have another video talking about learning with texts for reading, which I think is an amazing tool. And I also have 2 books in German that I want to read. One of them is Short Stories in German by Olli Richards, which it's great. It's a graded reader for intermediate learners, which I can read without having to stop too much. And you even have a glossary for difficult terms at the end of each chapter and questions to check your comprehension. I've read 3 of the 8 stories so far, and I like to take this book with me to college, for example, in case I have free time in between classes and I don't feel like listening to music. And the other book is, I do not trust my German pronunciation yet, but it is
Drachenreiter
by
Cornelia Funke.
This is a fantasy YA novel that I have tried to start reading, but it's still too complicated for me at the moment, mostly because it's a novel, so it's in the past tense and it has a lot of complicated vocabulary, but when I can finally read it, I know that I've definitely made progress if I can read this. I mentioned these books and learning with texts because reading is also something that I like to do, and it's an option that is always there when I get tired of watching stuff. And then I also like to use Busuu as an app. I got a year's subscription a while ago because it was on sale at a great price, and I really like the way the app organizes the content in short units. Busuu is something that I want to incorporate into my routine again, especially since it's a few months until my subscription runs out and I want to make quiero aprovecharla. I particularly like how the app has grammar exercises, it shows you new vocabulary, it has reading and listening exercises, and even a little bit of output. At the end of some lessons, it will ask you to answer a question either by writing or by speaking, and these questions get corrections by other native speakers that are usually learning your native language. It's definitely something that has also contributed to my progress in the language together with Anki, even if they are not as fun as watching a YouTube video. I think Busuu is preparing me for my inevitable confrontation with writing and speaking. For all of these more mechanical ways of learning, such as Anki, I feel like the key is to not get overwhelmed, to do it if you feel like doing it. If you feel like you have to force yourself to do it, then it's probably not the best resource for you, even if it's sold as the most efficient. And then when it comes to grammar, I like to study topics whenever I feel like it's more annoying to keep coming across a certain pattern or structure and not knowing what it means or how it works, than actually taking the time to read a little about it. Whenever I have a doubt that's haunting me, I just Google it or look for YouTube videos in German explaining them. I have a book called German Grammar Drills, it also has concise explanations for grammar topics and exercises. I use it whenever I feel like doing something with a pen and paper and not a screen. I used to use this book in a more regular way, but it got a bit tedious. So now I'm trying to make my studying a little bit more fun. It's definitely a great resource. I just mention it in case you are someone who prefers textbooks. You could check this book and some of the other books in this series. Last resource, I use it sometimes when I cannot sleep, which is not great. You should not look at a screen if you cannot sleep. But I'm talking about Webtoon. This is an app and a website where you can read web comics. They're like graphic novels, but divided into shorter chapters. There are countless stories on Webtoon in a lot of different languages. Particularly the ones that belong to the genre slice of life are great because it's like almost nothing happens in those stories. You just see people living their lives and all their relationships and their everyday problems. So they usually have really simple language. And again, something like a webcomic provides visual context that makes it easier to understand. So the cognitive load when you're reading a webcomic is definitely lower than doing something like reading a book. And I think that's it. I think I've gone over everything I do to learn German. I know this makes it sound like I spend 5 hours a day studying, and I promise you that's not the case. I just like to have several different options of things that I have tried and that have worked for me or that I find fun. There are other apps or resources that I have tried. It just depends on your personal experience. Just finding that combination of resources and activities that works for you. So I hope some of this was useful to you. Let me know if it was, or if you start watching Once Upon a Time, we can talk about it. I need to talk to someone. I might edit in some scenes that are just unbelievable. I watch this kind of ironically, or at least I started watching it that way, but now I think I'm watching it for real. And I want to talk to someone about it. Let me know in the comments if there are any other resources, even if there are shows, films, or content creators that you like in German. Is what's going to be useful to me, but of course you can tell me about other activities that you like to do if you study a different target language. It's been truly great to read your comments on my previous videos. Yeah, to read different experiences. I think that's why I started making these videos, because I've been having a lot of fun learning the language, but it's also really fun to share what I like to do to study it and I watch the same kind of video that I make, but from other creators. So whatever you want to share, it would be cool to read it. I think that's it. I'll see you in the next one. I hope you recorded this, or I'm gonna cry